If you've been avoiding rice, bread, or potatoes because you're worried about your blood sugar, I want you to stop for just a moment before you push those foods off your plate forever. For years, millions of people living with diabetes or prediabetes have been told that carbohydrates are the enemy. The advice often sounds simple. Stop eating bread, avoid rice, skip potatoes, and your blood sugar will improve. It seems logical because carbohydrates are eventually broken down into glucose, and glucose raises blood sugar. But here's the question almost nobody asks. If carbohydrates alone are the problem, why have populations around the world eaten rice, potatoes, corn, or bread as daily staples for generations while many maintained good metabolic health? Why do some people experience much smaller blood sugar spikes from the exact same meal than others? The answer is more interesting than most people realize. In many cases, the biggest difference isn't only the food itself, it's the way that food is prepared, the foods eaten alongside it, the order in which it's consumed, and even what you do after the meal is over. These small details can dramatically influence how your body handles glucose. I'm Dr. James Carter. For many years, I've worked with older adults who wanted to improve their metabolic health without feeling like every meal had become a list of restrictions. One thing I've learned over and over again is that long-term success rarely comes from fear. It comes from understanding how your body works and making practical choices you can actually maintain. Many of my patients arrived feeling frustrated. They had already given up their favorite foods, yet their A1C numbers continued to rise. Others were constantly worried about every bite they ate, making meals stressful instead of enjoyable. The problem wasn't a lack of discipline. More often, it was incomplete information. When people understand what actually influences blood sugar, they usually discover that they have far more flexibility than they imagined. Today's discussion is not about finding a miracle food or promising an overnight cure. Diabetes is a complex medical condition that should always be managed with your healthcare provider. Every person responds differently depending on medications, activity level, overall health, and many other factors. Instead, my goal is to share several evidence-based strategies that may help your body process carbohydrates more efficiently. These are practical habits supported by nutritional science and human physiology. They don't require expensive supplements or impossible diets. Most of them can be applied using foods that are already sitting in your kitchen. Some of these strategies may surprise you because they challenge advice that has been repeated for decades. Imagine eating the same serving of rice but seeing a smaller blood sugar rise. Imagine enjoying potatoes without creating the dramatic glucose spike you fear. Imagine making one simple change after dinner that helps your muscles remove glucose from your bloodstream more effectively. These ideas aren't based on wishful thinking. They're based on understanding how your digestive system, your muscles, your hormones, and your metabolism work together every single day. Over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through 6 practical strategies that can help you make smarter carbohydrate choices without feeling deprived. Each one builds on the previous one, so by the end of this video, you'll have a complete framework rather than a collection of random tips. Let's begin with one of the most fascinating discoveries in modern nutrition science, one that can change the way you look at leftover rice forever. Let's start with something that sounds almost impossible. Imagine preparing 2 identical bowls of rice, using the same ingredients and the same portion size. One bowl is served immediately after cooking. The other is placed in the refrigerator overnight and reheated the next day. Most people assume both meals will affect blood sugar exactly the same way. In reality, your body may respond quite differently. To understand why, we first need to look at what normally happens after eating starchy foods. Foods such as rice, potatoes, pasta, and bread contain starch, which is a complex carbohydrate made up of long chains of glucose molecules. During digestion, enzymes gradually break these chains apart into individual glucose molecules that pass into your bloodstream. As blood sugar begins to rise, your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin acts like a messenger, helping glucose move from your blood into your cells, where it can be used for energy. When this process works efficiently, blood sugar returns to a healthy range after eating. However, many people with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes don't respond to insulin as effectively. Their cells become less sensitive to insulin's signal, making it more difficult for glucose to leave the bloodstream. As a result, blood sugar stays elevated longer than it should. When this happens repeatedly over months and years, it places extra stress on the body's metabolic system. This is where something called resistant starch becomes incredibly interesting. Unlike ordinary starch, resistant starch isn't easily broken down in the small intestine. Instead of being rapidly converted into glucose, part of it continues through the digestive tract almost unchanged until it reaches the large intestine. There, something remarkable happens. Your gut bacteria begin fermenting this resistant starch, producing beneficial compounds known as short-chain fatty acids. One of the most important of these compounds is butyrate. Researchers have become increasingly interested in butyrate because it appears to support several aspects of metabolic health. Studies suggest it may help maintain a healthier intestinal barrier, support beneficial gut bacteria, reduce certain inflammatory processes, and contribute to improved insulin sensitivity in some individuals. In other words, resistant starch doesn't simply slow digestion, it changes where and how part of the carbohydrate is processed inside your body. Now here's the practical part. When certain starchy foods are cooked and then cooled, some of their starch naturally changes structure as it cools. This process creates more resistant starch than was present when the food was freshly cooked. Rice is one example. Potatoes are another. Pasta also undergoes a similar transformation. Even bread that has been frozen and later toasted may contain slightly more resistant starch than bread eaten fresh. The important point isn't that these foods suddenly become healthy or unlimited. Portion size and overall dietary habits still matter. What changes is the way your body digests part of that starch. Several studies have found that cooled and reheated starchy foods can produce a lower post-meal glucose response compared with eating them immediately after cooking. While the exact effect varies from person to person, it's a fascinating example of how preparation methods can influence metabolism without changing the food itself. This idea also teaches us a much larger lesson. Sometimes improving blood sugar isn't about removing foods from your life. Sometimes it's about understanding them better. Instead of asking, "Should I ever eat rice again?" a better question might be, "How can I prepare rice in a way that works more effectively with my body's metabolism?" That single shift in perspective opens the door to smarter, more sustainable eating habits. But preparation is only one piece of the puzzle. What you choose to eat alongside those carbohydrates may have an even greater impact on your blood sugar response. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. By now you've seen that the way food is prepared can influence how your body handles carbohydrates. But even if you never refrigerate your rice or potatoes, there's another powerful strategy that can help smooth out your blood sugar response. It all comes down to what you eat alongside your carbohydrates. Think about two different breakfasts. The first person grabs 2 slices of white toast with jam and a glass of orange juice before rushing out the door. The meal is quick, convenient, and almost entirely made up of rapidly digested carbohydrates. The second person enjoys a similar amount of toast, but adds scrambled eggs, a handful of avocado slices, and a small serving of plain Greek yogurt. Both meals contain carbohydrates, but they are unlikely to produce the same metabolic response. Why? Because carbohydrates rarely act alone inside your digestive system. When starches are eaten together with protein, healthy fats, and fiber-rich foods, digestion naturally slows down. Instead of glucose entering the bloodstream all at once, it is released more gradually over time. That slower release gives your body a better opportunity to process the incoming glucose without creating such a sharp spike. Protein plays an especially important role. When you eat protein as part of a balanced meal, your digestive system responds by releasing hormones that help regulate appetite and influence the speed at which food leaves your stomach. One of these hormones, GLP-1, has received tremendous attention in recent years because it also plays an important role in blood sugar regulation. You may have heard about medications that target this pathway. What's fascinating is that your own body naturally produces this hormone every time you eat a balanced meal containing adequate protein. This doesn't mean protein is a replacement for medication or that eating more is always better. Instead, it reminds us that building a balanced plate allows your body's own physiology to work more effectively. Healthy fats contribute in a similar way. Foods like avocado, nuts, seeds, olive oil, or natural nut butters slow stomach emptying, meaning carbohydrates enter your small intestine more gradually. The result is often a gentler rise in blood glucose rather than one sharp peak followed by a rapid decline. Fiber adds another layer of protection. Vegetables, beans, lentils, and whole grains contain fibers that create a thicker digestive environment, slowing the movement of nutrients through the intestine. As glucose is absorbed more steadily, Your pancreas doesn't have to respond as aggressively all at once. Now let's talk about something many people overlook entirely: acidity. Adding a small amount of vinegar, fresh lemon juice, or lime juice to a meal may seem insignificant, but research suggests these acidic foods can slow starch digestion and may also support healthy insulin sensitivity in certain individuals. That's one reason traditional meals around the world often include naturally fermented foods or acidic dressings. Sometimes these cultural habits developed long before scientists fully understood why they worked. Imagine eating grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a serving of cooled rice, and a fresh salad dressed with olive oil and lemon juice. Now compare that to eating a large bowl of plain white rice by itself. The difference isn't simply the number of calories, it's the entire digestive experience. Every additional component influences how quickly nutrients are broken down, absorbed, and utilized. Rather than thinking about carbohydrates as good or bad, begin asking a different question whenever you prepare a meal. What can I add to make this meal more balanced? That small shift in thinking often leads to smarter choices without making you feel restricted. But surprisingly, building the perfect plate still isn't the whole story. Even when you choose the right foods, one simple habit at the dinner table can dramatically change how your body responds to the exact same meal. Imagine sitting down to your favorite dinner: grilled salmon, steamed vegetables, a serving of rice. Nothing about the ingredients changes, nothing about the portion sizes changes. Yet one tiny adjustment could noticeably reduce your blood sugar rise after the meal. That adjustment has nothing to do with cooking. It has nothing to do with calories. It's simply the order in which you eat your food. Most of us don't give this much thought. We begin eating whatever is closest to us. Sometimes it's the bread basket at a restaurant. Sometimes it's a spoonful of rice before touching anything else on the plate. But your digestive system notices that order, even if you don't. When carbohydrates are the very first foods entering your stomach, digestive enzymes immediately begin breaking them down. Because nothing has slowed the digestive process yet, glucose starts entering the bloodstream relatively quickly. Now picture a different approach. Instead of reaching for the rice first, you begin with your salad. Then you eat your vegetables. Next comes your fish or chicken. Only after finishing most of those foods do you enjoy your rice or potatoes. You haven't removed a single ingredient. You haven't eaten fewer carbohydrates. You've simply changed the sequence. This matters because protein, vegetables, and fiber begin slowing stomach emptying before the starch arrives. By the time carbohydrates reach the small intestine, digestion is already progressing at a steadier pace. Instead of flooding your bloodstream with glucose, the carbohydrates are released more gradually. Several clinical studies have demonstrated that this simple behavioral change can significantly reduce post-meal glucose excursions in people with type 2 diabetes, even though the meal itself remains exactly the same. That's an extraordinary finding. Most nutritional advice focuses on changing what people eat. This strategy changes only when they eat each component. One of my patients once told me she thought healthy eating meant giving up every comfort food she enjoyed. After learning about meal sequencing, she was surprised that something as simple as starting with vegetables made her meals feel less restrictive while helping her continuous glucose monitor show steadier readings throughout the evening. Of course, every person responds differently, and your individual results may vary depending on medications, activity level, and overall health. But the principle remains remarkably consistent. Small habits repeated every day often produce bigger long-term benefits than dramatic diets that are impossible to maintain. This approach also works well when eating out. If bread is placed on the table before your meal arrives, there's no need to feel guilty or anxious. Simply wait a few minutes, drink some water, enjoy your salad if it's available, or begin with your protein once the main course arrives. Saving the bread until later may help create a smoother glucose response without making you feel deprived. Holiday meals can be approached the same way. Instead of avoiding your favorite family dishes altogether, begin with vegetables and protein before moving toward the more starchy foods. You still participate in the celebration, but you also give your body a better opportunity to manage the meal. By now, you've learned that preparation matters, food combinations matter, and meal order matters. But there's one more opportunity that begins the moment you stand up from the table. It takes only about 10 minutes, requires no special equipment, and activates one of the most powerful glucose-lowering systems already built into your body. So far, we've talked about what happens before and during a meal, but what happens after you finish eating may be just as important as everything that came before. Many people believe that once they've swallowed the last bite, their role is over. The body simply takes over from there. In reality, the minutes immediately following a meal create one of the best opportunities to support healthy blood sugar regulation. And the good news is that you don't need an expensive gym membership or an intense workout to take advantage of it. In fact, one of the most effective strategies is also one of the simplest. Move your body, not an hour later, not after you've watched television, not before bed, right after your meal. This recommendation surprises many people because they assume blood sugar is controlled almost entirely by insulin. While insulin is certainly an important part of the equation, it isn't working alone. Your muscles also play an essential role. Whenever your muscles contract, even during gentle activities, they require energy. One of their favorite energy sources is glucose circulating in your bloodstream. That means movement creates an additional pathway for glucose to leave the blood and enter working muscle cells. What's especially encouraging is that this process can occur even when insulin isn't working as efficiently as it should. This is one reason healthcare professionals often encourage regular physical activity for people managing diabetes or prediabetes. But here's something even more interesting. You don't necessarily have to perform vigorous exercise immediately after eating. Research has repeatedly shown that a short walk lasting around 10 minutes after a meal may noticeably reduce post-meal blood sugar levels compared with remaining seated. Think about how different that sounds from traditional exercise advice. You aren't training for a marathon. You aren't trying to burn hundreds of calories. You're simply giving your muscles an opportunity to begin using some of the glucose that has just entered your bloodstream. Timing makes a meaningful difference. The first 30 minutes after eating are when blood glucose typically begins climbing. Gentle movement during this period allows your muscles to start using that glucose before it reaches its highest point. Even a comfortable walking pace can be beneficial. You should still be able to carry on a conversation without feeling out of breath. The goal isn't intensity, the goal is consistency. Some researchers have paid particular attention to the calf muscles, especially a deep muscle called the soleus. Unlike many larger muscles that tire relatively quickly, the soleus is designed for endurance. It works quietly throughout the day whenever you're standing or walking, helping maintain posture and supporting continuous movement. Because this muscle is active for long periods without becoming exhausted, it also has an impressive ability to utilize glucose as fuel during low-intensity activity. You don't need to remember its anatomical name. What matters is understanding the bigger picture. Every comfortable step you take after eating gives your muscles another opportunity to help regulate blood sugar naturally. Of course, life isn't always convenient. Maybe the weather is poor. Perhaps you're eating at work. Or maybe your knees make walking uncomfortable. That's perfectly understandable. The important thing is not perfection. It's avoiding long periods of complete inactivity immediately after meals whenever possible. Walking around your home, putting away groceries, watering the garden, cleaning the kitchen. Even standing while making a phone call is generally more helpful than sitting completely still for an extended period. Many small movements accumulated throughout the day often contribute more than one difficult workout performed only once each week. This shift in mindset can also make healthy habits feel far more achievable. Instead of asking yourself whether you have time to exercise today, ask a much smaller question. Can I move for 10 minutes after this meal? For most people, the answer becomes much easier. You've now learned that preparation matters, food combinations matter, meal order matters, and movement matters. But one important question still remains. Are all carbohydrates created equal? The answer is no. And understanding why may completely change the way you shop for groceries. Walk through almost any supermarket, and you'll quickly notice something interesting. Nearly every aisle contains foods rich in carbohydrates: bread, breakfast cereal, crackers, pasta, rice, granola bars, cookies. Even products marketed as healthy often contain large amounts of starch. At first glance, it can feel impossible to know which choices are better. Fortunately, your body gives us an important clue. Not all carbohydrates are digested at the same speed. That difference has a tremendous impact on blood sugar. Let's compare two bowls of oatmeal. One is made from instant oats that become soft within a minute or two after adding hot water. The other is prepared from steel-cut oats that retain much of their natural structure. Although both come from the same grain, your digestive system doesn't treat them identically. Instant oats have already undergone extensive processing. Much of the grain structure has been broken apart before the food even reaches your kitchen. As a result, Digestive enzymes can access the starch more quickly. Steel-cut oats remain far less processed. Because more of the grain's original structure is still intact, digestion generally occurs at a slower pace. The same principle applies to many other carbohydrate-rich foods. Highly refined white flour products often digest much faster than minimally processed whole grains. Legumes such as lentils, beans, and chickpeas usually produce a steadier blood sugar response than many refined carbohydrate products because they naturally contain significant amounts of fiber, resistant starch, and plant protein. Fiber deserves special attention because it quietly performs several important jobs throughout the digestive process. Soluble fiber absorbs water and forms a gel-like texture inside the digestive tract. This slows the movement of nutrients toward the intestinal wall, allowing glucose to enter the bloodstream more gradually. Insoluble fiber supports digestive health while also contributing to fullness after meals. Together, these different types of fiber help create a slower, steadier metabolic response. Here's another way to picture it. Imagine building a campfire. If you throw dry paper onto the flames, it burns quickly with a sudden burst of heat before disappearing almost immediately. Now imagine placing a solid log on that same fire. The energy is released slowly, steadily, and for a much longer period. Many refined carbohydrates behave more like the paper. Whole, minimally processed foods behave more like the log. Your body generally prefers the second pattern because energy arrives at a pace that's easier to manage. This doesn't mean every meal has to be perfect. It also doesn't mean you should fear foods that don't fit neatly into one category. Healthy eating is rarely about perfection. It's about creating patterns that support your body most of the time. One practical strategy is to become a more observant shopper. Instead of focusing only on the front of the package, take a moment to look at the ingredient list. How many ingredients are listed? Can you recognize them? Does the food still resemble its original form? A loaf of dense whole grain bread with visible seeds and grains is often metabolically different from an ultra-soft loaf made primarily from highly refined flour. The same is true for brown rice compared with many heavily processed grain products. Whenever possible, try filling your plate with foods that still look like they came from nature. Vegetables, beans, lentils, whole grains, nuts, seeds. These foods bring more than carbohydrates. They provide fiber, vitamins, minerals, and plant compounds that support overall health far beyond blood sugar alone. But before you assume you've mastered carbohydrate management, there's one final habit that many people overlook completely. In fact, it has nothing to do with the food itself. It has everything to do with the clock. The time you eat your meals may influence your blood sugar almost as much as the foods on your plate. And that's where we're heading next. We've covered how food preparation, meal composition, eating order, movement, and carbohydrate quality can all influence your blood sugar. But there's one final piece of the puzzle that often receives far less attention than it deserves. Timing. Not just when you wake up or when you exercise. The time of day you choose to eat. Most people assume that if they eat the exact same dinner every evening, their body will respond the same way regardless of the hour. Surprisingly, that's not how human metabolism works. Your body follows an internal biological clock known as the circadian rhythm. This built-in system influences nearly every organ, every hormone, and many of the metabolic processes that keep you healthy. One of those processes is blood sugar regulation. Earlier in the day, your body is generally more prepared to handle glucose. Insulin tends to work more efficiently, and your cells are often more responsive to its signals. This allows glucose to move from the bloodstream into tissues more effectively. As the day progresses, however, these natural rhythms begin to shift. During the evening, many people experience a gradual decline in insulin sensitivity. That means the exact same meal that causes only a moderate increase in blood sugar at lunchtime may produce a much larger response late at night. Another important hormone begins to rise as bedtime approaches: melatonin. Most people know melatonin as the hormone that helps regulate sleep, but it also interacts with several metabolic processes throughout the body. As melatonin levels increase, your pancreas may become less efficient at releasing insulin. Combined with naturally lower insulin sensitivity during the evening, this creates a situation where your body has a more difficult time processing large amounts of glucose. This is one reason why late-night eating can be particularly challenging for people trying to improve blood sugar control. Imagine finishing a large dinner only 30 minutes before going to bed. Your digestive system is actively breaking down food. Glucose is entering your bloodstream, At the same time, your body's biological clock is preparing you for sleep rather than efficient nutrient processing. Those two signals are working against each other. Now compare that with eating the exact same meal 3 or 4 hours before bedtime. Your body has more time to digest the meal while you're still awake and moving around. Blood sugar has a better opportunity to return toward normal before sleep begins. Many people notice that making dinner slightly earlier doesn't just support healthier overnight glucose levels. It may also contribute to feeling lighter and more comfortable before bed. Of course, not everyone has complete control over their schedule. Shift workers, caregivers, and people with demanding family responsibilities often have limited flexibility. That's perfectly understandable. The goal isn't to create unnecessary guilt. Instead, think of meal timing as another tool in your overall strategy. Whenever your schedule allows, try finishing your final meal at least 3 hours before going to sleep. Even moving dinner earlier by 30 to 60 minutes can become a meaningful habit over time. When you combine this timing strategy with everything we've discussed today, the results become much more powerful than relying on any single tip alone. Let's bring everything together. First, remember that you don't necessarily have to eliminate your favorite carbohydrate foods. Learning how to prepare them differently, such as cooling cooked rice or potatoes before reheating, may help create more resistant starch and encourage a gentler glucose response. Second, build balanced meals instead of eating carbohydrates by themselves. Adding protein, healthy fats, vegetables, and fiber creates a slower, steadier digestive process. Third, think about the order in which you eat. Starting with vegetables and protein before moving to starch gives your digestive system a valuable head start. Fourth, don't underestimate the power of gentle movement. A simple 10-minute walk after meals may help your muscles use circulating glucose more effectively. Fifth, whenever possible, choose carbohydrates that remain closer to their natural form. Whole grains, legumes, vegetables, and fiber-rich foods generally support steadier blood sugar than highly refined products. And finally, pay attention to when you eat. Giving your body enough time to process dinner before bedtime works with your natural biological rhythms rather than against them. Notice something important about every strategy we've discussed. None of them asks you to become perfect. None of them requires expensive supplements. None of them demands that you completely eliminate the foods you've enjoyed your entire life. Instead, they focus on helping you make smarter decisions that can be repeated day after day. Long-term health is rarely built through one dramatic change. It's built through hundreds of small choices that gradually become habits. One balanced breakfast, one evening walk, one healthier grocery trip, one earlier dinner. Those small decisions may seem insignificant on their own, but together, they create a pattern that can support healthier blood sugar for years to come. Most importantly, remember this. Your body is not your enemy. It constantly responds to the signals you give it through your meals, your movement, your sleep, and your daily routines. Every positive choice is another opportunity to support the remarkable systems that are already working to keep you healthy. I hope today's discussion has shown you that managing blood sugar doesn't have to mean living in fear of every slice of bread or every serving of rice. Knowledge gives you options, and options make healthy living far more sustainable. I'm Dr. James Carter. If you found these practical strategies helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe so you won't miss future videos where we explore more science-backed ways to support healthy aging, improve metabolic health, and maintain your independence for years to come. If you have a favorite strategy from today's video, or if you've already tried one of these approaches, let us know in the comments below. Your experience may encourage someone else who is just beginning their own journey toward better health. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Until next time, take good care of yourself, stay curious, and remember that small, consistent improvements often lead to the biggest changes in the long run.